What is up, guys? It's your boy Yaniki. Today, our mission is slander. Today, our mission is creditless degenerates and reprobates speaking ill on my boy Izuku Midoriya. This is actually going to be my first time doing a two-part video for a character analysis because I want the first half to be anime-only friendly so that some of the slanderers, maybe anime onlys, haven't experienced the manga. We don't want to spoil that for them. So I want to kind of build up a case for why Deku is a good MC, even already within the context of the anime, while also educating these reprobates so that they stop I should really stop calling you reprobates because you'll just click off the video because I'm doing that. It's tongue-in-cheek, don't worry about it. So yeah, today, it's Deku Day. And it's a great day to be Deku Day because the My Hero Academia trailer dropped for Season 4. Ooh, nice. So, I'm going to dive right into this. I understand that first impressions matter. First impressions are some of the most important things when it comes to character interactions, even in the real world. So I understand that if you felt like Deku did not make a strong first impression, that's going to color your perception of him. But in the same way that we have rose-colored glasses, some people have on shades. And just because you feel like you're too cool to see the sun doesn't mean that it's not there. So we need to talk about some of the details that are often overlooked and some of the psychological aspects that are like real-world psychological applications being applied here to the Deku and his narrative and the structuring of his character and the way he interacts, from the fact that it's always emphasized that the parents inform the psyche of the character or the child and their behavior, to the fact that it's natural, like recovering from psychological wounds isn't something that's a one and done occurrence. This was emphasized heavily with stuff that I won't explain to you right now because I just realized I was almost gonna spoil this in what's supposed to be an anime only video. Caught myself. See, that's how you can tell I don't do this with the channel a lot. But the thing here is that Deku starts off sad. Notice, a lot of people don't notice this, or they comment on it, but they don't understand why. Horikoshi specifically writes into the story, or in one of the volume releases, that the reason why Inko shrinks and becomes plump is because she is depressed, because she feels bad having, like it's her fault that she gave birth to Deku and he ended up quirkless. Now, this might seem weird, but it's a very common thing actually within even the context of history. There's I think it's Henry VIII. I might be wrong about which Henry it is. Somebody can, fact check me in the comments if you want. I don't care. I'm not attached to that. I need to trim my mustache. It's poking my nostrils. Sorry, guys. If you see me doing that a lot throughout this video, it's just me trying to not get my nostrils tickled by my mustache. Things they don't talk about when they tell you about your beard. No. So, Inko Midoriya is depressed. Now, if you're around a mom who's consistently sad, who's consistently depressed, and you have a rough space, you're already ostracized from society. One of the things that I think is very important is that just because 80% of society overall has quirks, which meaning 20% of society overall is quirkless, does not mean that 20% of Deku's generation is quirkless. That is not the case. As we move closer to quirk singularity, as we get closer to, the quirks being too much for, people to handle, as we keep seeing all these crazy mutations and developments in the quirks, you have to understand that realistically, 5% of Deku's generation could be quirkless. You could have maybe 5% of them being quirkless, with it being that 30% of the grandparents' generations comparable to the boomers being quirkless, balancing out as you go down the population trail to average out to a 20%. But quirks are only becoming more common. So I don't think you should take it as Deku should have been surrounded by multiple kids that were quirkless. If you watch the movie for the My Hero movie, which takes place within Season 3, so if I spoil the movie for you, anime onlys, that one's just on you. It's been out for a year. When he meets Melissa Shield, David Shield's daughter, she is quirkless. It seems to be the first quirkless person that Deku has met in his age group, because he's completely taken aback by that. There's a good chance he has never met another person who was quirkless in his age group. And so from that perspective, it really does shift where you literally cannot do as far as society is concerned, you're basically crippled. It's like you wouldn't get a disability check for it, but everybody's gonna look at you like you should be getting one. It's it's weird. It's like what if you could be completely functional and still technically be wrong within the context of society. It's really hard to explain because it's such a unique condition where there's very rarely something that like it is kind of comparable to growing up with like a lame leg, so you've always got a limp because you just have a little less. You're not like fully different than everybody else, but you got just a little less of what makes everybody the same, and that's just enough for everybody to notice. I actually had a friend in high school who had to get multiple hip surgery, so he had kind of like a funny limp, and so that was something that always stuck out for like him as a person. Like that's part of how people identified him. And so for Deku, his identity for everybody else was that he was that nerdy, quiet kid that's always mumbling and trying to analyze things and take notes that didn't have a quirk. Always. That's just what you saw. Like, you don't remember any of the kids in Deku's class not laughing at him because they all had quirks. If 20% of his generation. So, look, you guys get the point. There's a lot. He is more alone than it sounds like on paper when you look at the 20% number. So Deku's been alone. He's been told to give up on his dreams. He's consistently bullied. There is no reason for you to tell me a 14-year-old should not be depressed and mopey, and since his dad's not around, he only has his mom's behavior, and his mom is quick to cry. She's quick to break down and visibly express those emotions. So he expresses those emotions. That's the natural progression of things. And he spends the entire first episode kind of like getting dicked by life. But after he's saved and he starts talking All Might, even when he couldn't save anyone, when his favorite person in the world told him, you can't be a hero, his subconscious still drove him to the incident where Bakugo and the sludge villain was. Now, something you need to think about this is that for as like scared and as much as he wanted to give up, as broken and defeated as Deku should have been, and as mopey and sad as you guys look at him as oftentimes, he was still subconsciously driven to go try to save the day. Deku was still about the action, and you even see that, you know, further like double down on when he charges in and try to save Bakugo from the sludge villain. Yes, he fails miserably, but he does manage to actually apply some of his notes in the middle of combat with the, you know, deflection, throwing his book bag, getting the stuff in his eyes, all these other things. So we see right there characterization that he's analytical, but he's also capable of applying his analysis and his thoughts under pressure if the stakes are real. When it matters most, you know that Deku can hold you down. That is something that you were supposed to pick up about him within the first 2 episodes. He's analytical. Yes, he does have his reservations. Yes, he is sad. Yes, he's been defeated by life in so many ways. Even after he boldly charged in there and managed to get, you know, All Might motivated to save the day, at the end of the day, he was reprimanded for trying to be a hero. He was reprimanded for trying to live his dreams, which is exactly what's been happening to him his entire life. The idea of having that dream completely made him an outcast to society. And this is especially something that's worth noticing, because as you progress, already he stops being completely subservient to Bakugo. You get a cutaway as they're going to the exam where like he yells at him and he's like, why are you applying? Why did you get in? Da 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 da, like all this other stuff. So we know that like he was standing up to him, telling him, you know, back off, I'm going to UA. So even the softness that you saw in the first episode is rectified by like episode 5. Even in his fight against Bakugo, the thing that makes him cry isn't even like it's because he breaks his arm in the battle training, and because he like also got his arm pretty heavily scorched by the explosion. He had been getting tossed around pretty hard already. He caught a pretty bad ass whooping, and the fact that he only shed a couple tears while collapsing in pain after breaking his arm in multiple places, because it doesn't, if you break just one place in your arm, it doesn't bruise the whole thing up. So you have to realize that he's getting like multiple fractures all throughout his arms, constant pain. That's what makes him cry. Even at like, it's amazing to me because like even by the time you get to the USJ incident, he's once again shown that proactive, being willing to take action, take initiative. He shows that he's willing to use strategy in battle. Like, it's weird because people will often say like Deku just throws a harder punch, but like in one of the first actual Deku versus villain fights in the USJ, he doesn't attack them. What he instead does is manipulates physics and like the way water works so that he can just pull them all together, and Mineta tossed balls in there so they all got stuck together so that they didn't have to fight, so he didn't have to punch. Yes, he tries to punch Shigaraki, and if that would have landed, dear God, a lot of things would have been better for the My Hero Society going down the road that you guys have no idea what's to come if you're an anime only watching this. But the reality is that in the context of the first season, Deku kind of leaves behind like being spineless. He stops being a crybaby. Within the context of the first season, he starts putting in the work, trying to, save people. He puts in the effort to fight, to train. Yes, he doesn't know how to use his power yet, but that's the thing. That's what's beautiful about it, is that Deku figured out started working on who he was as a person before he started working on what kind of power, like how he was going to fight, because his mind is his most limiting feature in combat. Let's look at the late season 3 meme of Deku didn't know he had legs, because Deku's entire fighting experiences up until this point has been him like catching L's, trying to emulate people who had better quirks, better success than him, and not really having his own place. So he wasn't thinking about it from the perspective of this is how like martial arts works, or this is how like combat works. He was thinking about it from the perspective of this is a quirk that I inherited from someone, and this is how they use it, so I'm going to apply that quirk in the same way that they used it, because that's how the quirk should be used, due to the fact that Deku was conditioned from living his life as completely different, that quirks are something that he did not have, and thus they become something special to him. Things that you do not have become a lot more special. The people who don't have like their parents tend to value the idea of a parental figure more. Like, people whose parents have died tend to be like, no, you should really, treasure your parents while they're here. You better love your mom, man. Same thing with Deku. He didn't have a quirk, and that's why the Koda thing stuck out to him so much, because Koda hated quirks, and Deku was a person who had to live his life on the outside, not having them, made it a point to reach out to him to try to, so the whole, see, there's like so many like little nuances that are fleshed out from the beginning that you have to really be tracking all these small things. A lot of these things you don't catch on the first watch. If I'm being honest, I had to, like, it's when I've been rewatching and doing things for the channel that I've been going back and seeing, okay, Deku, like even during the first fight with Bako, you can remember he says, I take back everything I said. That was him saying, I'm stepping up to the plate. If I want to be the #1 hero, I do have to compete with Kacchan. I am competing with Bakugo, and that's why I'm doing this. That's why I split it with Uraraka. That's like, you got to see the guy like apply leadership focus, like, cause he took the lead, he set up the strategy. You got to see him apply that early on, even when he was with Sue. Like, you've seen him be a leader. You've seen him be afraid, but you've seen him step up. Like, you've seen him take a beating and still keep trying to win. Yes, he collapsed at the end, but he won the war. He lost the fight. So even within the context of the first season, Deku kind of nuts up. It's in the second season where I really don't understand how the idea that he's so like a scaredy cat crybaby is like perpetuated, because the reality is that for the sports festival, I believe, I might be a little off on the math, takes place about a month into the school year. So one of the things that Deku is now adjusting to, keep in mind, psychological wounds do not heal instantly. So he finally got friends in high school. Deku did not have friends. You didn't see anybody talk to Deku except for that old man with the weird star quirk on his head and his mom. Deku had no friends. So the idea of people working with him, that's something that like he always wanted. He wanted friends, obviously, because nobody's like, I want to be a hero and live alone. Like, no, he wanted to be a hero, save people, help people, interact with people. Obviously, he wanted to be a good person to people and be involved with them. And so Deku getting past like the idea, like slowly but surely getting the constant reassurance. When you don't have those safety nets, it's very hard to open up. There are people who completely ruin their romantic relationships because they are so unfamiliar with having the actual healthy dynamic that they don't know what to do with it. I've dealt with a partner that very much struggled with it, and even admitted to me that she struggled with like feeling guilty because she got everything she thought she wanted to have psychologically and still couldn't properly express because at the end of the day she was still dealing with all the wounds from the past. And that's just the way life works. You don't just, get up and pop up. And I think that's something that has been kind of harmful and led to people criticizing this series, because a lot of series have people overcome a mental hurdle like that and they don't relapse, and that's not the way Horikoshi's been writing this narrative, because he's been trying to go for something that's more representative of the actual experiences of his audience so that they can grow and benefit from it. You can't tell a kid that he's going to just get over his problems like that, because that's just not how your mental health works, and that sets up false expectations and pitfalls for people. So what he's really trying to do is lay the foundation for how to beat your depression, and he's also telling us in a way how he beat his. Because as he got more, like as Deku gets more successful, he starts meeting more people who encourage him and believe in him, in the same way that a lot of people need to remember that Horikoshi, after having 2 of his manga serializations in Jump fail, plus so he had a Zoo manga, he had Barrage, and then there's also a manga, his debut manga when he was 18 or 19 was Tenko, which that's something that can be addressed in another character's video later. So he had been through these like failures and was trying to find a way, and like as he got better in the industry, as he made his chapter releases, as he became better known, I'm sure various peer groups, some of us have read the interview between him and Oda, where he tells Chida Oda, the author of One Piece, that he wants to surpass him and all these other things. And it really reads like a conversation between Luffy and Deku almost, where you can tell they both put a decent chunk of who they are into their main characters. And so what you're seeing to a certain degree is like the psychological steps that Horikoshi took making friends, but you also have to adjust to the idea that you're not alone anymore. Because when you get to the point, like myself included, something that people have said to me even within the past years, remember that no man is an island, because just because you've had to deal with all your problems alone throughout your life doesn't mean you have to now. If you have friends now, you can reach out, you can be close to them, and Deku isn't necessarily bad at reaching out to them, but it's still getting over that emotional rawness of actually having the connections and figuring it all out. And that's why in the second season most of the crying is actually kind of a gag, like his tears of joy when Uraraka wants to be on his team, that Mineta sees and asks if it's urine. Think about it, they start to become a gag. Them pushing him into the ground because they're so powerful. That's not to show you that Deku's a crybaby still. Instead, it's just that he's still got powerful emotions, and it's supposed to make you laugh. Like, people took that way too seriously. And like, even him crying, like a little, like shedding tears of joy. Winning the first race in the sports festival is like the first, like, it's okay. The only way I could compare it to is like, let's say you've been playing basketball, or you wanted to play basketball, but you like didn't own a ball, or like you didn't live near any courts, you could never get people together, nobody was really interested in your area, and then suddenly you move, in this case, you go to a different high school, and somehow you manage to get on the basketball team first string, and you've only really gotten to watch games, never really gotten to play with anyone, never played on a team, and you're like, let's say you're varsity, because that's basically what happened. Deku went from not having anything, being considered ain't shit, to essentially making varsity, like, fine, like, oh, he's technically the freshman hero. Like, you get the point. He's going to UA, the most prestigious school. Like, there's a lot to process and unpack there mentally, like, to come from, like, to undo the shackles of being told how you aren't good enough. And so, with the sports festival and his fight with Todoroki, he also doesn't end up getting, you see, he's like, applying his power. He's trying to find all the ways, and he himself says, like, even if I'm not good with my power right now, he's focused on growing. But like, you gotta think, Deku went from breaking his arm, breaking just the bones in one arm, and like that being enough to like, and taking some damage, and that being enough to KO him and make him like fall and like shed tears, to consistently breaking multiple fingers repeatedly throughout the fight and not shedding a single tear, but instead still like being there. Or maybe, fine, maybe there was some like that flow, I don't know. I'm gonna say he didn't shed a single tear, just in case somebody's like, well, actually, I'm like, no. But the fact that he wasn't crying, the fact that he was determined, like, what's taking over Deku by the time of the sports festival, even though like you have those like little emotional moments, it's his drive to win, his determination to go like further, to live up to the expectations that All Might has for him, and you see how much he genuinely cares. I don't understand how like you guys like people miss out on like the dedication that this character has to the expectations within the sports festival, but also to doing what a hero actually does. If I'm going to do this sports festival, if I'm going to put on this show and say that I want to be a hero, I need to not only be a hero because I can fight and win, but because I save people. And that's kind of the idea behind Midoriya, and the later conversation when Midoriya and Bakugo have their fight where All Might tells them they can be heroes who both save and win, because Deku got a little too focused on saving and ended up catching an L. And then he's crying, you know, in the office after getting an intense surgery, an in general intense fight, and you know, dropping out of the top 8. And All Might kind of gassed the man up a little bit. Not exactly one of his best teaching moments. Kind of put a lot of pressure on him. You gotta think. So you come from a fractured mentality of self-loathing, doubt, and despair, isolation, and now you're starting to experience harmony. You're starting to experience friendship, camaraderie. Because it's not like after he met All Might, he had time for friendship. He was going and, you know, doing all the workouts and stuff. And the thing is that I don't think Deku didn't believe in All Might. Deku modified the plan that All Might gave him because Deku didn't believe in Deku, and that's why All Might was like, no, dude, just trust me. I'm doing this for your body. You'll be fine. You just need to, you know, go through and do this the right way. So that's the psyche. So you've literally watched him shape into this kid that's actually willing to risk it all and go full force, full throttle. He went from being the guy that was scared of the small ones that could only, you know, respond when somebody's life was genuinely in danger, to somebody who could, you know, step up to the plate, not only when it was somebody else they needed saving, but when it's time to prove himself and his value and his, you know, prowess. And to the extent that by the time he figures out how to do full cowling, he was with Gran Torino for a couple of days, figures out full cowling, realizes that Ida is probably trying to find the hero killer, and has the audacity to decide that he is going to go and back up Tenya Ida and fight a man who has injured 40 pro heroes. He has successfully injured over 40 people, because it was said to be like 40, injured 40, killed 6, or something like that, before he fought Tenya and before he managed to hurt Native. The dude caught almost 50 bodies. Stain basically handed out 50 L's while he was famous. That's there's a manga spinoff for anime onlys. I don't know if you know this, called My Hero Academia Vigilantes. You actually get more backstory for Stain about 5-6 years before the main run. You should check it out. It's not going to be animated as far as I know, so you might want to go ahead and, like, if you don't have to. I'm not saying you have to read the main My Hero Academia manga, but you should probably bite that Vigilantes bullet if you liked Stain a lot and you would like more content that features that character. Just something that I thought I would throw out there to you. And so, when you have Deku, who's capable of facing other people's ideals, and not only does he face the hero killer, he hears what he's saying, he hears what he believes, he takes it all in, but that doesn't stop him from doing what he feels like he needs to do. Deku didn't pull up, punch him in the face, and be like, "Ooh, Ida, he's right. You were here for revenge. That is bad. So I'm gonna let him kill you or like mess you up." No, he still stuck to his guns. He was like, "Yeah, Ida messed up, but I'm a hero. This is what heroes do." His ability to stay on mission, his ability to focus and actually stand up in life or death scenarios. And that's the thing. The fact that he wasn't crying even after like getting paralyzed multiple times, like Deku took that whole fight with Stain like a champ. Even afterwards, when he had to be carried off, he was surprisingly like calm about the whole situation. Like, I think you guys need to really like go back and think about the way he was reacting. He was just like, "Yeah, I don't think any of us could have beat him." Like, mostly he was just tired from all the fighting and the blood loss. Even when he gets caught by, like, you know, the Nomu that pulls up and tries to abduct him, and Stain ends up being the one that saves him, he's terrified, but you don't see him break down and cry. No, instead you see him like freak out, like, "Wow, Stain's pretty, he's really about that action." And then we keep moving. Deku in the final exams gets filed on by Bakugo, doesn't break down crying. He's like, "Dude, you hit me. All right, but we need to focus." And then he even makes it a point to, you know, he snuck him, but he didn't sneak him, because like Bakugo needed that punch. And that's the thing, is that like by the time you get to the end of season 2, Katsuki Bakugo origin is the name of the episode, but you see the dynamic between Deku and Bakugo. It's no longer Deku just consistently like chasing behind him. Even back then, Deku is willing to smack him, talk sense into him. Yeah, he's still like a little like nervous about it, but again, he's been getting his ass beat for 9 years by this guy. It's been 9 years of getting his ass beat by this one person. I want you to tell me you could take L's from somebody for 9 years straight and not just kind of assume that you're always going to catch an L from him, at least for a little while. Especially because he wasn't as practiced. He was copying Bakugo for a lot of his motions, which is why a lot of them are often kind of stiff, because he's constantly cycling through people he's thought of or people he's seen and picking moves based off of that. So yeah, so even there. Now let's think back to like what happens after that though. The final episode of season 2 is an encounter. An encounter, he runs into Shigaraki in the mall, has Shigaraki's hands around his throat, and manages to actually just have the conversation. He doesn't like freak out and try to like run away with One For All and accidentally break his legs. He doesn't throw a punch and smash like 50, 100 people, like 5,000 people. He doesn't do any of that dangerous things. Instead, he, backs off. Or I mean, he accepts the stakes. And when Shigaraki walks away, he even takes the time to call him out and ask him what All For One wants. Do you realize how out of pocket Deku actually was at that point, within context of how much stronger than him Shigaraki actually is? Shigaraki was able to scale All Might's speed. Shigaraki basically beat Eraserhead to a certain degree. You gotta realize that Shigaraki would have probably beaten Deku back then. Yeah, 100% Smash. People love to bring that kind of stuff up, but one, you have to understand that he doesn't want to use the 100% Smash. Two, yes, Deku could do that, but because he tried to avoid it, that'd probably be what would get him killed. But the point is that he would actually try it. Is what you should be more focused on here. Is the boldness, the bravery, the heroic spirit that it takes to be willing to take a fight that you might not win, or you realistically will not win. In fact, more than likely you will not win. So I'm just saying, Deku is an extremely, brave, noble, attentive person. And Shigaraki didn't want to but he also knew Shigaraki didn't want to make a scene. That was him playing into the moment, trying to get what he could out of it instead of just catching the yell and just being hoed out by Shigaraki. So now we're transitioning into season 3. Training camp arc. Look, I brought it up earlier. Deku, we see the way it quirks and not having one affected him. He talks to Koda about it. You can tell that but at this point Deku is already at a point where he believes that he can go out and save people, and he can kind of interact with them in a way that he can make them better. Pixie Bob and Mandalay especially note that Deku is actually a pretty solid contender. So as a fighter already, you guys should be able to respect him, and off that alone, pro heroes are acknowledging his skills. They're saying he's comparable to Bakugo, Ida, Shoto, who Bakugo and Shoto are the big two of the class. They're the two heavy hitters that everybody gasses up because of Bakugo's victory in the sports festival and Shoto being Shoto and Endeavor's son. So we've now gotten to a point where also it's important to note that by this point Deku is a lot more comfortable. You don't see him freak out every time Uraraka talks to him. You don't see him being that same panicky, jittery dude when he's interacting with people. There's a lot more confidence now. He's still somewhat nervous about things later on in the 3rd season where the provisional license happens, where there's the whole running into Kami, who's actually Toga, and she's naked, and that whole debacle, and he's still kind of nervous about Bakugo, but he's mostly nervous because of the fact that he just knows Bakugo's angry. He's just oh, I'm not gonna get yelled at again, I'm not trying to deal with this. There's a certain level of, you can tell that Deku's just kind of, there's a point where it just kind of feels like Deku's more just uncomfortable and kind of disappointed that the situation is just kind of rough. So But the thing is that during the training camp arc, you see Deku like break down a couple times. Now let's review these contexts that you guys are holding against him. Having a known serial killer that you know for a fact killed 2 pro heroes because the kid of the 2 heroes he murdered is right behind you, is trying to kill you. You've got 2 broken arms, by the way. I mean, you got 2 broken arms, you're literally being crushed into the ground, about to be murdered. There's a chance you're not going to save the kid. You had a promise you made to All Might. You told your mom you would be fine, and now you're about to die. And she was already worried about you doing stuff with UA because of the fact that, you know, the encounter with Shigaraki at the mall. These are all things that have to like cycle through Deku's head, all the psyche, all these concerns, all these people that are going to be hurt. The fact that he is going to die. I don't know many 15-year-olds who can sit there and be like, oh, I guess I'm going to die, except for the ones in series that do not take place in a modern society. You cannot compare a 15-year-old of today, look at, you know, oh man, well, like 15-year-old so-and-so in rustic time period where he'd probably get sent to the military in our world if we look back and think about like how old a page or a squire was, and then when they could become a knight and all that other stuff. Maybe it's not that, you know, it's just not it's an intellectually dishonest comparison. So you like got to make sure you're focusing on modern people in these situations. Some like a modern kid from a normal like middle class type background that just gets bullied all the time is not psychologically supposed to be as ready for combat as somebody who, you know, has seen like 50 bears have to be hunted or some other, you know, or done like 50 hunts with their dad, because if they didn't go with their dad to hunt the deer, they're gonna die or they won't have food for 2 weeks. Like it's just a very different context. You need to like keep a modern sensibility, because a lot of people do this like false comparisons with other series, and it's detrimental to the analysis of both My Hero and whatever series you compare it to if it's from a very different time period, because then you're setting yourself up for disappointed in either My Hero or the series you're comparing it to in that regard, whichever one you end up liking more. So you have a Deku who's, yeah, what? And here's the thing, Deku broke both of his arms, almost died, and his next step was to get Koda safe and then go report to Mandalay so that she could know that Bakugo was a target for kidnapping. Do you realize how gangster you gotta be to break both of your arms and then go run and be like, all right, I'm gonna drop this kid off, then I'm gonna go handle this other thing and go tell this lady this. Then my next goal after telling her this is gonna be to try to find the dude that's gonna get kidnapped. More than likely leading to me getting to a fight with another villain, or multiple villains. The level of which like heroic spirit is outshining the sadness of yesteryear, the way you can see even in these first 3 seasons that Deku has grown to be a person who can make those snap decisions, will do it. We'll do it confidently. We'll have the skill to somewhat back those up. I mean, he had the skill to tussle with Stain within the context of that fight. He had the skill to, you know, tussle with Muscular, because he did bait him, you know, with the broken left arm and all that other stuff. He was just kind of outscaled by him as far as durability went, and that was where the big issue was. You've seen him make those decisions. You've seen him make the play. By this point, Izuku Midoriya should be a playmaking, smart kid who just happens to be still like a little nervous at times, but overall is an analytical, genuinely kind, focused person who contributes and, you know, is actually aware of his surroundings and tries to pay attention to the moods and the feelings of the people he's in school with. So by the time we get to the failure of this arc, it's because Izuku knows he's made this progress. It's because Deku knows that he's like, I've learned full cowling. I managed to beat Muscular. I saved Koda. I got the report to Mandalay. I managed to save Bakugo at one point. The only thing left here is to actually, you know, seal the deal, get him home. And he fumbled the ball at the end zone. And it's not even like he fumbled the ball, but that's something that is going to rip you apart. And I don't care who you are. If you can tell me that if you knew somebody since you were 5 and you were 15 in high school with them and you saw them get kidnapped in front of your eyes while your arms were broken, after all the stuff you have been through that night, you wouldn't be upset, possibly crying. I don't know, man. Like, you might actually have some empathy issues. Might. Emphasis on might. Don't get upset. Uh, so when you look at the context of that and like what follows, which is him being busted up in a hospital for 2 days, slipping in and out of fever dreams, and getting surgeries done on him and hoping that he can like somehow live, all he's had to think about is his friend getting kidnapped and the fact that a bunch of them got injured, all these other things, and just being in pain. The thing that I love about what happens here is that Deku starts thinking even more creatively, right? When we go to rescue Bakugo, the whole point is to avoid fighting at all. Deku has been so focused on this linear, well, All Might shows up to beat the bad guys, and he beats them up, so that's how he's always approached things. The way Deku has been differentiating himself and like thinking differently than what he's used to perceiving as All Might's behavior for most of the series, and this is one of the beginning points and one of the themes of season 3, is him slowly getting away from being latched on to those ideas. And so as he's moving away from those, this is also in thinking about how he saves people. So when you get to the fight, he's like, I gotta follow the rules, I gotta make sure that I don't get caught, and I gotta make sure I actually save Bakugo. But the reality is that I am not a valuable combatant. This is one of the things that he had to accept about himself, and you're not always the hero to win the fight. That's something that you see even early on when Kamui Woods was fighting the giant. Mount Lady came in. Could Kamui Woods possibly have handled that dude? Sure. We don't know for sure. I think it was a kind of scenario. Or like the big pink muscly looking dude that, or as Next Taku calls him, the penis villain. You know, that guy, most of them couldn't beat him. Or even the sludge villain, when they talked about the shutout, you need to learn, you can't just decide you can save the day all the time. Sometimes you literally aren't the right person to save the day, or save the day, or beat the bad guy. And so Deku, understanding that lesson, understanding the way that the entire situation needed to be handled, chose the optimal route of going above the battlefield and getting Bakugo extracted off of it so that All Might and All for One could continue their tussle to the fullest. Now, if you can look at all that, the psychological like thought processing behind it, and what, you're gonna hold it against him because he cried when All Might retired? Come on, guys. Come on. How is that a negative? Actually caring about his sensei's career? Think about the context. Yes, one, he's relieved because he finally saved Bakugo. 2, a bunch of people died. It's directly stated that there were many casualties at Kamino. And the provisional license art, like Ida straight up says, like, yeah, there were a lot of casualties. But also, think about the context. We saw people out on the town as they were sneaking up on the warehouse. Those air cannon blasts were going quite a few city blocks. You think nobody was getting blasted? There's a few people who got blip blapped. We found people in the rubble. A woman almost got killed because All for One noticed her and he used that as bait to draw out All Might and like get his weakened form out. People died there, man. People died. So you've got all that happening, and Deku's also gonna lose. Like, his favorite hero can no longer do the thing that he's been setting out to do. Out of sympathy for like your bro, like that. Imagine your homie is like top tier basketball player, top tier gamer, whatever. One of your friends is like just killing it, and or somebody like let's say your dad, your mom, whatever. Let's just say your mom or dad is just killing it. You've been idolizing them for whatever it is, cooking, roller skating. I have a friend whose mom used to do professional roller skating, whatever, something like that. And all of a sudden, boom, both knees are destroyed. They can never walk again. They can never do that thing again. You're gonna be hurt for that person. But also, you almost just died. So I don't know why you guys would like view that as being a crybaby, because that's kind of just normal. people usually cry a little when they think they're gonna die, or it happens. It's a very common thing, especially for children, which is something that I think a lot of people forget. If you look at Deku through the lens of an adult, all right, yeah, you might be like, dude, you got to get this together. But even All Might himself says it. Sometimes I forget that you're just a young man and I focus on your power too much. It's because you guys see Deku throw hands the way he does, that sometimes you're not looking at the pain and the psychological past that he's got leading him down the path that he's on. My mustache is acting up again. And so when you look at season 3, where he finally has his fight with Bakugo, he's got his license, because it's important to note that in the license arc, he was ready to take command of the entirety of Class 1A, essentially. The only people who had left at the time was Bakugo, Kirishima, Kaminari, and Shoto. Everybody else was okay with the idea of Midoriya being their class captain, essentially, even Ida and Momo. So the leadership skills, they're there. He's got the leadership feats. He's got the feats, bro. It's in the panels. That's a shout out to my boy Silvers. He does One Piece content. So yeah, all I can say is, you guys, from where he starts off as a loner, super dorky, obsessive kind of loser with no quirk, no hands, no girls, just sitting there being he's like an incel, but not one of the problematic ones, to the Chad Deku that pulls up with the Iron Souls. The Iron Souls, bro, when he kicked basically like a cliff, he like destroyed a mountain with one shot. The dude that's out here like fighting ninja chicks that are naked, who's saving the day while like making sure to not get in trouble this time, who's coming up with better plans and strategies, utilizing not only his own abilities but those of the people around him to the optimal like settings. The reality is that, like, if you guys are looking at Deku and what he was doing to prepare to be a hero, and then the training he's been getting at UA and the culmination of these, you have to understand that Deku, with all the analysis and data that he had acquired growing up, and the ways he had thought about applying it, and now finally having the quirk and the body to apply this knowledge, is essentially becoming more and more the ideal hero. And this is why All Might picked him. He saw that potential. And where we are right now in the anime, when you get towards the end, where he fights Bakugo, and you see the way he was the only person to properly analyze Mirio's movements, who is like the strongest student in UA, and he managed to catch Mirio's eye. You see Mirio at the end of the season says, I think Sir would like him. And so he's like thinking about, Izuku's future and where he could go as a hero. He's impressed the best people in the verse. All Might's impressed by him. Endeavor seemed impressed by him. Stain was impressed by him. All For One figured out who it was. I mean, don't get me wrong, All For One roasted him and said he wasn't a good student, but hey, he figured it out. Shigaraki specifically put him on the kill list because he decided he doesn't like him. And Shigaraki decided he was a student specifically worth talking to. I mean, you could argue that he would have talked to any student, but I think the fact that it was Deku is what solidified Shigaraki making that decision. So I just really wanted to like get this out there and kind of like talk about the journey, and how I really think that the first impression of like that first episode and those first 2 episodes where he's so weak and defenseless really colors people's perception of him throughout the entire series, because like those recap episodes might be hurting his like people's like ability to actually enjoy Deku as a character. I highly recommend you like rewatch this, kind of just look for some of the things that we talked about throughout this video. We're going on 45 minutes now, so I'm gonna leave this right here. This is also actually like the good stopping ground, because we discussed the season finale. Right now, with where Deku is in the anime, you have somebody who's shown capable of leadership, someone who's willing to take the fights, who's, when it's time to step up to the plate, is going to do it, and he's going to try to do it the best way possible. Not necessarily the way in which brings him the most glory, the way that brings him the most happiness, but the way that actually gets the job done. So, yes, you've seen Deku be hesitant. Yes, you've seen Deku, struggle throughout the series and, have those insecurities and be sad and be mopey. But the reality is the Deku of yesterday is not the Deku of today. And if you saw the preview, all I can tell you is that you're going to really look forward to this next season of My Hero Academia. Like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed anything I had to say, you thought the analysis was worth listening. And I just really hope you're ready for the overhaul arc because Deku goes serious and he starts to whip out his